Good evening. How in the world are you doing tonight? So tonight I want to come on here and express my deepest sympathies to Judge Ken Starr's family, his wife Alice, and their children, grandchildren, all that knew and loved Ken Starr. I'm going to say a couple of things, and then I'm going to do a replay of the interview I did with Ken um, in June of 2021. I'll never forget when Mark Victor Hansen reached out to me and said, "Hey, how would you like to have Judge Ken Starr on your show?" And me being me, I said, "Who's that? I know the name. Why do I know his name?" And he reminded me he was a federal judge. He was the Solicitor General of the United States. He led the legal team in the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and he actually, in this interview that I'm getting ready to show you, Judge Starr actually talks about that. I asked him about it, and he was kind of thwarted into that role. And he was just an absolutely amazing human being. And so tonight, I just wanted to do a replay of the interview that I did with him. I strongly suggest. I actually did a private book signing event with my friend Kevin Bacon, State Senator Kevin Bacon, here from Ohio. And him and I put on an event, and had a bunch of people show up, dignitaries and all kinds of. It was incredible. But Judge Starr and his wife Alice showed up, and then we all went to have a private dinner. Not all of us, a handful, like 6 of us, 8 of us, something like that, went and had a private dinner with the judge and his wife. Ken signed a book, this book. He signed it and wrote a really wonderful message on the inside of the book to me and my wife. Just an incredible man. And I am honored to have gotten to know him. I had been thinking I need to reach out to him and talk to him. He lived in Waco, Texas. Many may recall that he was the president of Baylor or Baylor Law School at Baylor University, or I'm not sure what the title was, but he accomplished some amazing things in life. And you'll see in this interview that he is an incredible, jovial, funny, hilarious man that just passed away. And so, in memory of Judge Starr, please be respectful. If I see any comments come up that are disrespectful, I will delete and block you, just so you know. So, this is in memory of the great Judge Ken Starr. And I hope you enjoy this. It was an incredible, incredible moment in my life to get to meet him and know him. I actually have a voicemail saved on my phone from Judge Starr. So here is the interview. Check it out. I will end this live stream directly after the interview. So pray for his wife and his family, and Judge, may you rest in peace, and hopefully the world continues to live your legacy. And thank you guys, all of you, anyone watching. Doesn't look like we have a lot. I think I'm being shadow banned right now. Imagine that. Anyway, enjoy this interview. Much love to you all, and we will see you all very, very soon. I want to bring Judge Ken Starr to the show. Judge, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Ken. So good to be with you.
You know, I did a little personal survey, and it came back that you have the #1 best first name ever.
Yeah, a very objective survey, very scientific. Subjectivity eliminated.
Yeah. I knew with a name like that you had to be a great guy. So I'm very grateful to our mutual friend Mark Victor Hansen for introducing us. So yeah, somebody in the comments says 2 stars today. That's awesome. So Judge,
I'm just gonna say we love Mark Victor Hansen, so forgive my interruption. So
no, please interrupt anytime you want. So you know, I started the show about 3 years ago, and it was literally to help people get unstuck in life, because we all go through trials and tribulations, and some people don't know how to get unstuck, and I've been there. I know that. And so, you know, why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, just give a little bit of background on where you were born and raised?
Yeah, I was born here where we live in Texas. I was born in North Texas. My father, my late dad, was a bivocational minister and a barber to really make ends meet. But I grew up in San Antonio. We moved to San Antonio, my beloved hometown, when I was going to 3rd grade, and I went through high school there. So I'm a native Texan, 6th generation on my father's side, then went off to school, graduated from George Washington. I was encouraged in high school by my counselor to go to Washington, D.C. I tried to go to Princeton, didn't work out. The admissions office, very smart, denied the admission. So, but it was a good thing that I went to Washington, because that began talking about, you know, breaking through walls and so forth. That started opening up doors. That was years in Washington, D.C., working on Capitol Hill to put my way through college. And I was torn, very briefly, between, do I go to law school or do I go to graduate school? I was very interested in teaching. I was very interested in politics. I was very interested in law. I really didn't know which way to turn. And my faculty at George Washington University, I'll always be grateful to them, guided me to grad school. So I go to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and a PhD program. But I got a master's degree there, but said, you know, I just don't think this is what I'm really called to do. So I became, as I call myself, a refugee from grad school to law school. And it was in law school that I really found my professional calling, my footing, and so forth. And then, so the rest is all thanks to the goodness and guidance, by God's grace, as I see it in my worldview, of mentors along life's journey. And that's one of my themes, Ken. Mentors are not only helpful, they are invaluable in guiding you along the pathway.
Amen to that. I have a very good friend here who was a state senator with the GOP. That he said, I called him. I said, I have Judge Ken Starr coming on. He's like, I met Judge Starr several years ago, and I guess you shook hands and gave him your book or something. But Kevin Bacon. But yeah, very good friend of mine. But so you know, as you, I often wonder, because as a kid, a teenager, for me, I really thought. Now, I didn't end up going to college. I went to the University of Hard Knocks. But the, you know, I do remember I obsessed for a while about wanting to become an attorney. I always thought I would be a great attorney. What was it? Was there something in your childhood or upbringing that made you think, man, I'm going to become an attorney someday?
I was interested in history as a kid. As a very young kid, I loved history. You know, growing up in San Antonio, the shadow of the Alamo, history is just around
Yeah.
you. The history, the glorious history of Texas, etc. And I became convinced that in America, in contrast, this is a Tocquevillian point. Alexis de Tocqueville comes here and says, hey, you know, in this country, the people who really are opinion shapers are not the aristocrats to the extent we have such a thing in America. We certainly don't have the landed gentry and all of that, are the attorneys, because we are a law shaped, a concept. We have a written constitution. Our mother country didn't have one. Canada only got one in the last generation, but we had a written constitution. We, of course, based who we are on the Declaration of Independence. And then Gettysburg, the new birth of freedom, that was Abraham Lincoln, the self-trained lawyer. So lawyers were opinion shapers and influencers, and sometimes we get a bad rap. But the fact remains, everyone should have the bumper sticker. Have you hugged your lawyer today? And display it.
I agree. Totally agree with that. So you graduate law school and did you go to work for a firm? Did you start your own? Did you put out your own shingle, so to speak? Or where did things go for you at that point?
Once again, it was a mentor, Ken. One of the deans at the Duke Law School grabbed me, as it were, figuratively speaking, by the scruff of the neck and said, "You're going to go clerk." And I was interested in clerking, so I was very privileged to be guided. It was almost a private placement through an interview process with a wonderful United States Circuit judge, Court of Appeals judge in the federal system, named David Dyer from Miami, Florida. And dear Judge Dyer was so precious to me, and my one co-clerk at those benighted days. So each judge only had two law clerks. Today, who knows, they have a number. But I was so gifted in the sense of I was given this gift of this wonderful mentor who had been a great lawyer, very successful lawyer himself, had represented all the great corporate clients in Miami in litigation. He was a real courtroom lawyer.
Yeah.
And I so admired him. And then, so I said, Judge, toward the end of my clerkship, I didn't graduate first in my class, but I still would like to at least give it a shot. I'll feel better if I did, to clerk at the Supreme Court of the United States. And he said, I'll call Lewis. Lewis was Justice Lewis Powell, who he knew well from private practice days, etc. And one thing led to another, and the door that was open, Justice Powell was too bright and smart to hire me. But he was kind enough, with his generosity of spirit, to promote me, so to speak, to Chief Justice Warren Burger. So I was very privileged by virtue of David Dyer, going back to the Duke Law School, David Dyer, Lewis Powell, then I actually clerked for Warren Burger, and that opened up any number of doors.
We have a legend on here, Jeffrey Gitomer, who's a great friend of mine, that is expressing his love for you, by the way. He's a great author, a great friend. So you ended up in, now is that where you did not, and pardon me if I don't understand all of the terminology.
Sure, sorry.
But so you were not a judge yet at that point, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was a law clerk, so this is what law graduates do for judges, for those two judges. And I began the practice of law in California with a wonderful law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. That opened up a huge door in the fullness of time. I became a partner in that firm, but in the Washington, D.C. office. I started in California, but came to Washington, D.C. to practice law, became a partner January 1, 1981. On January 20, 1981, the shortest live partnership at Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, I resigned from the partnership. Somebody said, boy, you must have made a lot of money in those 20 days. No. And I became chief of staff to a Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher partner from Los Angeles, William French Smith, in the Reagan administration. And then that opened up other doors. So just once again, mentors, and by God's grace, these opportunities came my way, which I did not merit.
So when you say in the Reagan administration, does that mean that you worked under President Reagan?
Yeah.
Wow.
40 years ago, this very year, the year of our Lord 2021. So I'm not going to say it was like yesterday, but it was day before yesterday, figuratively speaking, that as a young lawyer, I was again in my 30s at this stage, mid 30s, and happily married, two children at the time. A third was destined to arrive, again by God's grace. So I entered the Reagan administration on Inauguration Day at the Justice Department as the Chief of Staff to the Attorney General. And William French Smith, Bill Smith, member of the greatest generation, had served in World War II in the Navy, was a very good Navy man, great patriot, was very close to President Reagan, was his personal lawyer, but more relevantly, he was one of the senior partners of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, Los Angeles. And so I began, very briefly, doing specific things right after the election. And the election was not one of these cliffhangers that we've had from time to time. President Reagan won handily, so it was very clear. And it also then Bill Smith, the future Attorney General, was serving in Los Angeles as the head, it was called the Transition Advisory Committee at our law firm. So President Reagan would come in from Pacific Palisades and operate out of our law office. We're very proud of that. I mean, I think even the Democrats in the firm were, boy, this is pretty special.
Wow. And
also, President Reagan had been such a popular governor. I mean, not uncontroversial. He had controversies, but he'd been a very popular governor of California, overwhelmingly reelected. The guy won elections, right?
He sure did.
And everybody loved him. Right. You could disagree with him, but how could you dislike him? He was not, shall I say, a divisive figure, other than some of the Eastern press would take their shots at him, that he was cruel-hearted and these other very mean-spirited and blatantly wrong accusations. Yeah, I knew President Reagan. I was not an intimate of him, but I knew him well. And he was such a good human being. Right. And he cared deeply about this country. And hopefully every president cares deeply about the country above self. And that's the kind of person Ronald Reagan was. And Bill Smith reflected that as someone who, as I say, had served in the Navy during World War II and just was a great patriot and a friend of freedom.
Yeah. I've often said Reagan was the best president we've ever had. My opinion, of course. I think a lot of people share that opinion.
Yeah.
So you actually got to, I don't know if this is the right term or not, but hang out with President Reagan and have conversations.
Yes, not very many. Now, I don't want to exaggerate because first of all, I was off in the Department of Justice, which is 10 blocks away from the White House. But we did rub shoulders from time to time. And then we both spoke at William French Smith's funeral in Pasadena, San Marino, California. And I spent time with the president there. And I just came to feel as if, really more vicariously through Bill Smith, who was one of his intimate. Here's an example of the intimacy. So a little bit of history here. As you know, in March, only 2 months into his tenure, he was shot almost fatally by John Hinckley, right? Yeah. And so he's in recovery in the residence, as we call it. So he wasn't going into the Oval Office. But in the meantime, Bill Smith, Attorney General Smith, had learned that Justice Potter Stewart was going to step down from the Supreme Court of the United States. So as the chief of staff, I knew that, but I was sworn to secrecy, even with our own staff at the Attorney General's office. So it was a super close hold, and we did hold that. But here's
Right.
how close Bill Smith was to Ronald Reagan. Bill goes over to the residence, and in the residence, with no White House staff around, informs the president that he, the president, will have the opportunity to replace Potter Stewart. And then both Potter Stewart and Bill Smith, Attorney General Smith, went to the residence so that Justice Stewart could explain or just share the news personally with the with the President of the United States that he, Potter Stewart, was stepping down. It was just one of those really beautiful things, but it shows the closeness of the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Smith, with the President of the United States.
That's absolutely incredible. So then where do we go from Reagan? We go into
I was appointed as a judge. That's
okay.
when I became a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, way above my head. I had to work really hard because I said, look, I'm working with people like Antonin Scalia on the court, Robert Bork on the court, future Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I could keep going, just a pantheon of great figures. And I was 20 years their junior, not as smart as they were. So I really had to work hard, but I did. I worked very hard and tried to make my own contribution, modest though it may have been, to the work of the court. And I served very happily on that court for 6 years.
Wow.
Then after President Bush 41, and I was closer to President Bush 41 than I was to President Reagan. I'm from Texas. I knew him when he was in the House of Representatives and Congress back in the 1960s, so a long time ago now. So I was asked to become the Solicitor General of the United States. And so I moved then from the courthouse, which I loved, at 6th and Constitution, back to the Justice Department 4 blocks away at 10th and Constitution, and became the Solicitor General under President Bush 41.
So now, all this time, did you maintain a residence in Texas, or were you just living in D.C.?
Actually in Northern Virginia. So
okay.
when I got the clerkship with Chief Justice Berger, we were actually in California, in Los Angeles, living in Mid-Wilshire. I took the bus to work. Yeah, I think that's against the laws, at least at the time, of California. I'm sorry. You don't take a bus. You got to have a car. Well, we had one car between the two of us. And so guess who got the car? Because Alice was working at USC, University of Southern California. She was the one person in the family qualified to go into higher education, which I was destined to do. You know, there it was. And maybe that's why I got fired at Baylor. You were utterly unqualified to do it. So anyway, so we moved from California and we lived. We were about to buy a house in California when the opportunity came to be in Washington, D.C. So we bought a beautiful Victorian townhouse on Capitol Hill, which we adored. We loved it. But when children started arriving, we said, well, we're going to head to the suburbs. So all those years, save for those first 3 years in Washington, D.C., we lived in Northern Virginia, in McLean, Virginia, Fairfax County.
Okay. So you have got one heck of a sense of humor. I love it. So is it safe to say? Yeah, where's Alice? So is it safe to say then that at some point you have suffered from imposter syndrome?
No one wants to imposter me.
No, but you felt like you were out of your league. You said like, wow, what am I doing here?
Exactly. This is like Senator Birch Bayh of Indiana. I was on a panel with him. He was the last one to speak, and he said, well, in his great Hoosier accent, he said, well, I feel like the caboose on a fast-moving train. So, so I was the caboose moving from one train to another. Oh, it's rough being the caboose. You swung all over the place. You just try to stay on the track.
I get it. I totally get that. So you became a judge. Then the what's the Solicitor General? I should probably know that. As you can tell, I'm not a history buff. I'm not- but
Yeah,
what does the solicitor?
that's why
What
you have the show.
it's so I can learn,
You know,
right?
your mind isn't burdened with this kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's a fancy sounding name. The Solicitor General argues cases in the Supreme Court for the
Oh,
Justice Department and for the executive branch. So it's a great, great position. It's a small office of about 20 lawyers. That may sound like a lot, but no, the Justice Department has thousands of lawyers, but this is a very small cohort. And then just a very interesting part of American history. The office was actually created in 1870 in the aftermath of the Civil War during the Grant administration, when the legal responsibilities of the Justice Department, especially with respect to Reconstruction in the South, just skyrocketed. So the Attorney General essentially said, and President Grant was a very, very smart guy, underestimated by much of history. But Ron Chernow's recent 10 fantastic biography on Grant shows what a really fantastic person he was. He was ill-served in the government by some crooks around him, but he was a person of integrity. Anyway, he knew we've got to have infrastructure here. And so the Solicitor Generalship came into being in the law of 1870, and it's been, the responsibilities have changed somewhat, but the primary responsibility, the most visible responsibility, is to present cases in the Supreme Court of the United States.
and that's is that an appointed position? It's not
Yes,
elected.
correct. Nominated by the president
Okay.
and confirmed by the Senate.
Jeez. How okay. So I've always wanted to ask you're the first person I've ever met that had to go through a Senate confirmation. What was that like?
For me, it was actually pleasant. The chairman of the committee at the time was someone named Joe Biden. And I had a very good relationship with then Senator Biden, Chairman Biden. And we had a huge conversation. The only controversy was really my age. Who is this guy, and so forth and so on. So, yeah, I'd gone through a confirmation process previously and so forth. So, anyway, both my confirmation as a judge and my confirmation as Solicitor General were essentially pleasant and uneventful, the way confirmation hearings should be, but especially these days, they just aren't that way.
Or I gotta say, and you write about it in your new book, the confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Yes,
It was brutal. That poor woman. I thought that was brutal. And Clarence Thomas, I believe, went through a pretty brutal confirmation. So, but so you had it easy. They took it easy on you.
Well, as I say, when I was going on as judge, really the only controversy, happily, there were no skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
And so there was nothing to, and it was also during the first Reagan term. And, if a president has a mandate, and President Reagan had a mandate, then the other side just doesn't mess with it, right? Just say, okay, let's just go forward with this. But when I was being confirmed as Solicitor General, the Democrats were in charge. Elections every 2 years, right? So the Senate had flipped. There was a Republican Senate when I was nominated to go on the Court of Appeals, but there was a democratically controlled Senate when I was then nominated under President Bush 41. And it could have been acrimonious, but it wasn't, because I was a judge and I'd served for 6 years. So I no longer had the youth. I was in my early 40s, so still young, but as in my profession at the time viewed as still young, but I had a track record on the Court of Appeals. I'd had a non-controversial record as chief of staff to the Attorney General, even though there were controversial issues,
Sure.
lots of controversial issues in the Justice Department during my 3 years of service. So, yeah, I did not have to go through the brutal experience of so many nominees, including, obviously, above all, Justice Thomas, who was treated in my judgment, very unfairly.
I will second that. I concur. So it's amazing to me because although you're a judge, you're being appointed by politicians. I mean, right? And these are, I mean, career politicians. Some of them, they've been in Washington for a long time. So,
right.
How is there any, I know people that work in the federal system and it seems like there's always a shift when there's a shift of power, like, yes. Oh, my job's no longer there. Was there any of that going on for you where you were like, there's a new administration coming in and what's going to happen to me?
Well, that's exactly right, because I was serving under President Bush 41, and I loved serving as Solicitor General. I enjoyed arguing cases in the Supreme Court. I was arguing cases in other courts of appeals across the country, federal courts of appeals, not in the state courts, and enjoyed that greatly. But we have these things called elections, and the election of 92 brought in President Clinton. You'll recall Ross, well, you're too young, but Ross Perot ran.
I remember Ross Perot.
Yeah, Ross for Boss, right? 1992. Yeah. And he took, for a third-party candidate, a huge swath of the vote, the most since Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose movement, when Teddy Roosevelt fell out with President William Howard Taft. And that, of course, had cost President Taft the election in 1912. And so, people can argue, the politicians can argue. I happen to think that Ross Perot cost President Bush his reelection, but we were in an economic downturn. We were coming out. But remember the colorful James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. And President Clinton was a superb campaigner. And so here was youth, energy. Let's let someone else, but let's face it, he got 43% of the vote, right? He did not get 50% anywhere close to it.
Yeah.
And so the remainder, the 57%, was divided between Ross for Boss and the incumbent president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush. And so off I go. And so that's when I returned to private practice in Washington, D.C. I thought I was going to go back with my old law firm, but there were some structural reasons, had nothing to do with compensation. I wanted to serve in leadership and governance, and then I had the opportunity with a wonderful law firm named Kirkland & Ellis, with a large Washington office, but Chicago-based. And so I resumed, and finally resumed the practice of law, but finally began some serious teaching as part, and I made that clear. I want to begin teaching. So I was teaching at New York University, pre-Zoom. So I'd go up on Thursday nights or very early Friday morning to New York. Wow. And would teach at NYU Law School, which is a wonderful law school.
Is that a flight?
Yeah, I would sometimes take the train.
Okay.
In fact, more than once, I would see then Senator Biden on the train, right? He'd hop off at Wilmington, and I talked to him a couple of times on the train. He was, to say that, I know people, it's very divided, polarized, but to say that Senator Biden was affable would be an understatement. So just hugely open, relational, and so forth. And so I had a couple of train conversations. But yeah, I would either take the train or the shuttle from D.C. up what now is Reagan National Airport up to New York, to LaGuardia.
Wow. So you know some things that you could probably never speak of, but I think that there was a point, and I don't know the exact point, but you were you have a book about the Clinton investigation, probably, but maybe skyrocketed you into stardom was that. I mean, obviously you weren't well known, but that, I think, how did that all come about, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. Yeah, I was minding my own business, practicing law, uh, and teaching at NYU, and the Clinton administration had a really rough start. For those of us who said that first year was really very, very tough.
Yeah.
And so I'm just observing while practicing law and so on and so forth. And then the fateful call came in the summer of 1994. So the president took office January 20th, 1993. So I was minding my own business for that year and a half. And the call came from my former court, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. One of the judges on that court with whom I had served, his name is David Sintel, a distinguished judge who is still serving there, was the head of the Independent Counsel Division. Now, it's a mouthful. The Independent Counsel Division of the United States Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. What a mouthful.
Wow.
And that was a 3-judge panel chaired by David Sintel, and their job was to appoint what we now call special counsels, or what we used to call special prosecutors. Then they were called, the name changed. And this mechanism, which is very unusual, was created during the Carter administration by the Ethics in Government Act as a post-Watergate reform. So in light of Richard Nixon, Archibald Cox, the Saturday Night Massacre, all of that set the stage for the passage of the Ethics in Government Act, which had a number of provisions. And one of the provisions was to create this unusual mechanism for 3 judges to appoint an independent counsel to investigate the president or others close to the president. So I was actually appointed by 3 judges in 1994 to serve as independent counsel to investigate President Clinton. The original idea was it was the Whitewater land deal, and was there fraud, financial crimes committed in connection with that land deal. But the investigation grew. It had different components. And of course, most notoriously, then in January of 1998, was transmogrified into the Monica Lewinsky related investigation.
Wow. And you headed that whole thing.
That whole thing.
Wow.
For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, definitely for poorer.
But you have to stay, and that's one of the things, and I have this sense about you, that it feels like you're very objective. Like
I try to be. Thank you.
You seem to stay very objective, because I couldn't speak of Biden as friendly as, I'm sorry, I'm too non-objective. But so and I love what Gittimer says here: ethics in government, oxymorons.
Well, it was an effort.
Well, but you think back to the Reagan era. And one of Reagan's, one of my favorite quotes is what Reagan says about the government. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or more government. What did he say? More government isn't the answer, or something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
And Ken, that used to be a bipartisan sentiment. Part of to go back, part of President Carter's mandate was to curb the size of government.
Yeah,
regulatory reform. The bureaucracy had become bloated, etc. This is 1976 to 1980.
Yeah.
And Stephen Breyer, now a justice on the Supreme Court, served during this time as a real regulatory reform person in the United States Senate under Senator Ted Kennedy.
Yeah.
Right? We got to get control over the bureaucracy. Griffin Bell, who was a great man, was a very fine attorney general under President Carter, wrote in his memoir, the largest threat to American liberty is the bureaucracy. This is not a sagebrush rebellion. This isn't the teapot. I started to say teapot dome. I know the Tea Party.
The Tea Party, right?
My small mind is cluttered with too much history. So the Tea Party phenomenon is all part of a long meta narrative about, hey, liberty in this country. We need liberty, and the bureaucracy all too frequently stifles freedom.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. Well, and look, over the last, I don't know, let's just go with 8 months ish. We've experienced some insanity in the election cycle. And
now, where do you stand on these issues, Ken?
I mean, it's been, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. It's been crazy. I can't even watch the news. I can't do it because it just makes me insane. I'm too emotional about it. So, but Jeffrey Gittimer asked a question in the comments a little bit ago, and I'm curious what your take on it. They're going through the audit process right now in Arizona. What if I know this is a what if, but what if they find that Trump actually won Arizona? What happens?
Yeah, nothing. But nothing. Wow. Nothing legally, but a lot politically, right? Because that will remind us that, hey, this is the issue of integrity in elections is serious. And to even say that now brings the wrath of all these forces. Oh, you're against democracy. No, we're all should be in favor of honest government. And after the narrow election in 2000, a bipartisan commission was created, chaired by Jimmy Carter and by former Secretary of State Jim Baker. And I think everyone then had confidence. Okay, they're going to give it their best shot, whether I agree or disagree and so forth. The commission is in good hands. And it sure was. And guess what? One of the things he said was, watch out for what we now call mail-in ballots. Absentee ballots will give rise to potential. They didn't say it is always bad, but it gives rise to the potential for fraud. Don't we care about honest elections? So I think if the Arizona audit, and it's a big if, said that the election was actually quite different, the election outcome, and President Trump won that state, it'll be a real wake-up call for fair-minded people. Fair-minded people, we've got a problem. We need to address that problem. We want honest. If you don't say you care about honest elections as opposed to just every vote counts, oh, really, every fraudulent vote counts, there's no suggestion of fraud. And that's what we've seen, right? There's no suggestion of fraud. Well, let's test that. And my view is I don't make accusations.
Sure.
Say I was objective. I don't make accusations and I don't embrace theories. I simply say, as to John Adams before the Boston Massacre jury, facts. Please don't give me conspiratorial theories. Give me facts. And that's, I think, what all fair-minded people should do. Facts.
Yeah. Well, and that's how you rose to the levels you've risen to as a judge as well. So, I'm sitting here, people are sending me text messages and all.
Don't read them. Don't read them. It's bad for your blood pressure.
I know. I'm like, now I have to eat more broccoli. Thanks.
Yeah.
But,
no, that gets you gas. Don't do that either. That's really bad.
So I mean, and yeah, there's a lot of what ifs, but I think that there's a lot of the states now looking at a full blown audit on that, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Absolutely. Because I think I really think that there's let's just go, we'll say 75 million or so people that are like, what happened here? This
Right.
something doesn't feel right. But so I want to talk about your book, and I'm going to hold it up and show everybody
Well, thank you.
Religious Liberty in Crisis. By the way, I'm an Amazon influencer, and this book is in my Amazon store. So you can go to kenwalls.shop. It's there. And so what, and we could talk about the Clinton book that you wrote as well if you want, but and I know there was a little story behind that if you care to share it. If not, we can talk about this. But this book is phenomenal. It's absolutely a wonderful book. I'm almost finished with it. It's one of those books that you can't read it super fast. For me, I'm not the history buff that you are, but I found it so interesting. All of the cases, especially Supreme Court cases that you bring up, and it's incredible. So, what made you decide to write this book,
Yeah,
Religious Liberty in Crisis?
and thank you, Ken, and thank you for saying the kind things about the book. In a word, pandemic. When the pandemic hit and the governors in some states, obviously not all, began issuing these very sweeping orders in the interest of public health, and we're all, of course, public health governors, mayors appropriately step in a public health crisis.
Yeah.
But I was deeply concerned about the way churches and other institutions were being treated in what I thought was really an unreasonable way, an unfair way that was really not required by any means. I'll give a very specific example, which I think brings it home. The governor of Nevada issued an order that permitted Caesar's Palace and the other casinos to operate one half capacity, but prevented churches, synagogues, and so forth from operating with more than, or worshiping, gathering more than 50 people, no matter how large the auditorium or the sanctuary. And no matter the fact that these churches, and so many of the churches are very large churches with very large facilities, were scrupulously abiding by social distancing, mask wearing, and so forth. I said, as we say, that ain't right. So I began thinking more systematically about the book, writing a book, and did. And so Religious Liberty in Crisis was generated by the pandemic, but it has a much broader focus. And thank you again for your kind words. I wanted the great principles, identify 6 great principles of religious liberty, to be accessible and understood by every single literate American. I wrote this so high school civic students, homeschoolers, or students about to go off to college, and they're going to be facing, especially if they're people of faith, some real challenges to their voice. They may be challenged in the sense of, do I have the courage to speak up when I think that the professor is really completely off base? So this is a book that is essentially dedicated to America's culture of freedom, which, as I say, is now under assault from many different levels, many different officials, many different sources in our culture, including educational sources.
You know, I think, in another huge point, because I've read most of the book, is again, you're very objective. It's not just about Christianity. It's about Christianity. It's about Judaism. It's about every religious practice in America, and how, you know, I mean, you use the word government overreach in the book. I saw it here with our church, and I was like, why are we shutting down churches? That seems like it didn't seem right. It just didn't feel right. And that the governor would have the ability to tell a minister to not gather and worship.
Well, the governor did not have that ability. At least did not have that ability to issue an order that had the effect of discriminating against churches in contrast to casinos or Walmart. I love Walmart. Ain't got nothing against Walmart, but you can't, consistent with our great principles of freedom, governor or mayor, say, okay, Walmart, you're okay. And here was really kind of, I think this was a straw that broke a lot of backs of the believing community. Liquor stores, essential, right? Marijuana shops where marijuana is legal, you're essential. Churches, you're not essential. Wrong. The First Amendment condemns that, and the Supreme Court of the United States, and this is part of the hopeful message of the book, time and again over the past 40 years, the Supreme Court has rallied to the side of religious liberty. They've done it already this term of court. We're likely to see, Ken, in the next 2 weeks, another major decision in favor of religious liberty. That's a hope, a prediction that religious liberty will once again carry the day, as it does almost all the time in the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I didn't say all federal judges, did I? No. All too frequently, the federal judges, the district judges, with all due respect, I love them. And all too frequently, the federal courts of appeals, I love them. I served as one for 6 years, get it wrong. But the Supreme Court of the United States, and frequently by overwhelming margins, we're not just talking about, oh, well, it's just the conservatives versus the progressives. No. One very quick example. It's the first principle that I talk about of the great principles in the book, the principles of churches being able to be free to, I call it the autonomy principle, fancy to, you govern your own affairs. The Supreme Court of the United States unanimously told the Obama administration, EEOC, and the Obama administration Justice Department, hands off. You cannot go after a Christian school in Michigan for firing one of its teachers, even though that firing, if it had not been a Christian school or religiously affiliated school, might very well have violated the civil rights laws. Right. Our civil rights laws are precious. They are very important to us. I am thankful for our civil rights laws. But the Supreme Court, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, God bless her, it was a unanimous court, said, no, EEOC under President Obama, you leave that school alone. This is a powerful principle, very powerful principle. The idea of freedom of conscience, and that's under assault right now with the Equality Act, which sounds, oh, we're all in favor of equality, but what the Equality Act is passed by the U.S. House of Representatives and pending in the Senate would do would be to squelch freedom of conscience, which is one of the great principles of American liberty in our sweet land of liberty. So I want this to be a Paul Revere type call, not just the culture is challenging, we all see that, but here is the response. We can all be, as it were, as in Lexington and Concord of old, we can be Minutemen, not armed with muskets, but armed with the principles of American freedom. We can march to the Village Green and we can engage the culture, including our own school board members.
Amen. And I'm amen, and the whole church said amen. So I now I'm going to get fired up. So I think that, and there's a question that somebody just asked, and I'm going to pop it up on screen in a second. But I want to ask, it seems like, because we have, I won't call out names, but there are plenty of governors who way overstepped. There was and you bring it up in the book, the fellow in Florida, the minister that got arrested. And there were more than one. I mean, there were several ministerial arrests that occurred. And it's, here's the thing. There, I feel like even if it's the Supreme Court, because I have another friend that has a Supreme Court thing came down a few weeks ago, and ruling of the FTC keeps overstepping their bounds, and now they're trying to sneak around and pass a new bill through Congress or something that that's, to circumvent what the Supreme Court just ruled on. And so there's all these political moves going on, but it doesn't seem like anybody's getting held accountable. Like, what is okay, yes, bad governor, you shouldn't have done that, but what are the repercussions? Are there any?
Yeah. Guess what? Gavin Newsom of California is having to pay, well, not out of his pocket.
Right.
So unfortunately, it's the taxpayers, doggone it, but is having to pay attorney's fees to the churches that got closed down. Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beauties of federal law, that when these cases are brought and you eventually win in the Supreme Court of the United States, you get the recovery of attorney's fees. Now you say, well, what are the repercussions of that? But they also lost. The point is the Supreme Court of the United States can't lock the governor up, right? But it's a huge hand spanking through you and through other voices. We get the word out. Hey, guess what? And here's a big, big streak. Remember Teddy Roosevelt? Walk softly, carry a big stick. Well, I say speak loudly and carry a big stick. And one of the big sticks is, if now, in light of the clarification of law on church closures, some governor or mayor does something like this, then that governor or mayor can personally be held liable for punitive damages.
Personally. Wow. Okay.
Big stick. And all it takes is for the lawyer to send a letter to the governor's council and say, the law is now absolutely clear. If you want to litigate this and you lose, you will have established, here's the beautiful language, a clearly established federal right. The Supreme Court has said, don't treat churches, synagogues, etc. dissimilarly. If you do, boom, you can be hit for punitive damages.
That's awesome. That's good news.
There's lots of good news in the book, Brother Ken.
Trust me, I know. And everybody watching needs to go get a copy of it. Here's the question. So does religious freedom come before public safety during a pandemic? And I have an opinion about that. I'm not sure what my opinion matters, but what do you say?
No, first of all, it's not that it comes first. It is, how do we achieve both goals of achieving public health? And you can do that through social distancing and masking requirements. So yes, does the governor have the authority to require people going into church to keep social distancing? Yes, presumptively they do. Now, not forever, right? If they try to do now, okay, everybody, if you've been vaccinated, everybody's hands goes up. Okay, no matter what, the governor says, I don't care that you've been vaccinated, right? You're going to keep socially distanced. Oh, and you're not going to have the choir sing. Well, excuse me, governor, you've gone too far. So you have to bring the question down to the specifics. Can both interests, the interest in free exercise, which is a paramount constitutional interest, and then the interest in public health be accommodated, which is another one of the great principles, one of the six. Hey, we're getting there. The six great principles, including accommodating religious belief and religious expression.
Right. I mean, in California, there was some insane, completely illogical, like, you can have a gathering of 6 people in the front yard, but nobody can use the bathroom or something.
Oh, yeah, just madness. Now, this was absolute madness. So you have to say, is someone just utterly intoxicated with power? But this goes back to you and say, oh, you're just a conservative Republican. That's true. But it goes back to the bipartisan interest in maintaining freedom. I keep summoning to the stand Jimmy Carter and Griffin Bell. Get control over the bureaucracy. And we should not be at all shy about saying, government, governor, your excellency, whatever you want us to call you. The baseline is freedom in this country. This is not Venezuela or Cuba. Here in the sweet land of liberty, Freedom is the baseline. Now justify what you're doing. And maybe the government can justify it. But here's the beauty of these great principles. When the government comes up, well, here's our excuse. It's public health. So, okay, now let's try the case. What facts do you have? Oh, there we are. We come back to facts. What facts do you have that suggest that that person can go into Walmart, right, but cannot go to church? You tell me that. What's your principle? What's your principle?
No logic. There's no logic in it.
Yeah.
None. And we witnessed that. You know, somebody asked about mask mandates.
Yeah.
That seems unconstitutional as well. But what do I know? I don't.
No, the short answer to that is the government can take reasonable steps, and that's not self-defining, right?
Yeah.
The Fourth Amendment speaks about unreasonable searches and seizures. How do you know whether something is reasonable? You've got to, oh, there we go. We go back to fact land. Don't debate it at a philosophical level. We're a practical people. It's one of the beautiful strengths of the American people. What works, right? Does this work? Oh, that didn't work. Trial and error, the scientific method, practical, good old common sense. So is there a justification for a mask mandate? Because that's a serious intrusion. To say that you got to wear your mask out on the beaches of California, ooh, justify that. My own view was that's ridiculous on its face and is unconstitutional.
Yeah. But again, does that go back to personal opinion, or does it go back to scientific fact? Or, you know, and there's so many avenues you can go with that. However, there's only one avenue you can go with this amazing book, Religious Liberty in Crisis, and that is you have to get a copy. Now, is there a way besides Amazon? Do you have a website that people can purchase this from, or?
No, but I do have, for those in the household of faith, so to speak, a wonderful alternative, and that is Hearts. Are you ready for this? Hearts and Minds Books. heartsandmindsbooks.com. Okay. It is a for-profit, family-owned Christian bookstore. And I have no financial interest in it. They'll give a discount. They will ship it. They're really wonderful. I'm a member of the board of the Christian Legal Society, and the Borgers, Byron and Beth Borger, always put books in their trolley, and they head to wherever the Christian Legal Society annual meeting is, and they set up a bookstore in the hotel, etc. They're wonderful people. So that is certainly one alternative.
And it's heartsandminds.com.
Hearts and Minds Books. You need the word books in there. Hearts and Minds Books.com.
I'm going to scroll that across the bottom.
Oh,
everybody go over to heartsandmindsbooks.com, or you can get it on Amazon as well. And look, my wife is on here and she put it up there as well. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, she watches just to make sure I don't say anything too stupid.
But then it's too late.
I know. Well, Judge, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show. Everybody needs to get the word out about this book. It is an absolutely incredible book. I won't tell, like Mark Victor Hansen, who introduced us, I haven't even read his entire new book yet.
Oh, it's a wonderful book. Ask and ye shall receive. Right.
Amen. It's a great book. So
it is great. But thank you this time.
Thank you. And if you would stay with me, just so we can wrap up after I finish the live stream. Thank you so much. It's been a great honor to have you on the show. So stay with me, and I'll chat with you in a second. Everybody have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't, share this out on all of your social media platforms. Thanks so much. Rest in peace, Judge Starr. Um, what a great, great man. And wow. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you for sharing this out. And God bless Alice Starr. My prayers and thoughts are with you and your family. And just send some love and prayers to the Starr family. Judge Starr, rest in peace. You guys have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for watching and being here, and we'll see you soon.